Thanks, Chair. Minister Freeland, how many jobs, Canadian jobs, will be lost with your job-killing oil and gas cap?
I was under the clearly mistaken impression that we were here to talk about the TMX pipeline, a pipeline which we got built and the Conservative government didn't.
It's very fair that a minister comes to committee.
And since we're
open to
talking
sharing,
about jobs, I'm glad to point out 35,000 jobs were created during the building of the pipeline.
Okay,
and
well,
that's great.
How many jobs will be lost with the emissions cap? I just need the number, Minister.
There will be tens of thousands of jobs created as a result of the emissions cap. If you just look at the Shell Polaris project, the Strathcona project, the Pathways project that we all hope will move ahead, all the jobs that were created through the implementation of methane reduction technologies, this is an enormous opportunity that will create tens of thousands of jobs in Alberta. You see it with Linde, you see it with Air Products, you see it with Dow and the first net zero petrochemical facility, you see it with the Imperial Biofuel facility. My goodness, I mean, go and have a look at what's happening on the ground.
I just need a number. If you don't have the number, just say so.
Tens of thousands.
Okay. So you're saying tens of thousands of jobs will be created. Deloitte has estimated that 110,000 jobs will be lost in Canada due to your job-killing oil and gas cap. Are you confirming today that tens of thousands of jobs will be more than 110,000 jobs that you're going to drive away from Canada? Yes or no? I just need a yes or no.
Look, the oil and gas cap is intended to incent economic activity and the long-term competitiveness of the oil and gas sector while doing what we need to do to address the climate issue. It is very disturbing for me that the Conservative Party of Canada increasingly seems to be a group of climate deniers. At the end of the day, you have to actually address that issue and address it in a manner that's going to create economic opportunity. Your questions are ridiculous. At the end of the day,
point of order. We have Ms. Stubbs. We got a point of order. You know what? Once again, colleagues.
I wouldn't deign to lecture anyone about
I want to answer your point of order. If I could ask you to just pause. Thank you. Colleagues, once again, question and allow time for an answer. Just so, Mr. Hallan, you have time to ask your question, and the Minister has time to provide a fulsome answer to your question. So if we can work within those parameters,
Fair enough. I'll move on because the Minister obviously, with his non-answer, proves that he admits that the jobs will not be recovered, the ones that he's going to lose with this emissions cap. So I'll move on. And I think it's important to note that it's my constituents and Albertans who are going to be impacted the most with this oil and gas cap, that they know how many jobs will be lost, because most of them will be out of work in that field because of you. Minister Freeland, you preside over one of the worst GDP per capita growth since the Great Depression. Can you confirm that you've done an impact assessment that what this oil and gas cap will do to your deficit?
Okay, there are so many untrue statements embedded in what you've said, so I'm going to have to go after them one by one.
I just want an answer to my question. Have you done an impact assessment?
I actually wasn't given a chance to answer.
And GDP per capita growth. I just need that answer. I didn't ask for anything else.
Once again, Mr. Hallan, you've asked your question. I want to give the Minister an opportunity to answer your question. Minister Freeland, please go ahead and provide an answer.
It is absolutely appropriate for me to make clear the falsehoods embedded in your question. It is not okay for me to just drive by those. So I'm going to go through them systematically.
Just the GDP per capita, is it not the worst?
If that was the only question you wanted to ask, you didn't need to offer all of the false fluff to begin with. So let me go after the fluff.
It would be nice for you to answer so we could move on.
So, Mr. Hallan, and Ms. Freeland, if you could get direct and answer the questions that he's asked and provide an answer.
I'll be direct. Thank you, Chair.
Well, no. Hold on, Mr. Hallan. I want to give Minister Freeland a time to answer the question. So, Minister Freeland, briefly provide an answer to the question.
I simply can't let the falsehood stand. So first of all, you began by saying something untrue about what my colleague Minister Wilkinson said. Minister Wilkinson was very clear that we believe that our policies are both bringing down emissions and bringing good jobs to Canada and Canadians.
Which is not true. Okay, Minister, since you're not going to answer, I have about a minute left.
In terms of GDP, since we're here to talk about, no, you didn't actually, you didn't order share.
So we have a point of order, Minister Freeland, and I know you're going to the GDP answer, but I have a point of order from Ms.
Yeah, I would just note the bizarre spectacle of extremely powerful elite ministers of the government of Canada, of a G7
So,
country,
Ms.
constantly
Stubbs, that's not a point of
constantly
order.
shutting down and cutting off both women member of parliaments and an ethnically diverse
So,
member of parliament. So
Here,
perhaps these guys who love to play
gaslighting.
identity
Okay,
politics,
so,
just answer the question.
Colleagues, first of all, Minister Freeland is also a strong woman in the government who's here answering questions.
Yeah, I certainly don't think she has a problem with the
Let's
heat.
not target members based on their gender or their ethnicity. I'll ask everybody to, let's everybody just take a
wanna
deep
play
breath and
identity
tone down a
politics,
notch.
that's how it works.
So we can get back to the issue at hand today. That's the Trans
Chair, I only
Mountain
have a little
Pipeline
bit of
expansion.
time.
You do, Mr. Hallan, have time.
so
I
I'd like
have
to
it on
move on to
hold.
my next
But
question.
I do add a point of order I have to
Right.
address.
I'd like that
Minister
time
Freeland, a brief, I want to give you a chance to answer on the GDP brief, and I'm going to go back to you, Mr. Hallan, on the GDP answer you're just about to give, and then we'll go back to you.
Okay, TMX, which we're supposed to be here to talk about, is adding 0.25% to Canada's GDP. That is important. In the G7, Canada will have the second strongest GDP growth this year, and the IMF forecasts that we will have the strongest GDP growth next year. And it looks like we're achieving a soft landing after the greatest recession since the Great Depression.
Minister,
That's something we
just
should all
to
be
correct your
celebrating.
falsehood, you said 0.25% in GDP. In fact, your gas cap, oil and gas cap, is going to take a 1% hit to our GDP, according to Deloitte. You can shake your head all you want, Minister Wilkinson, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Now, the dollar is trading at $72 right now. In your budget, you had projected WTI would be at $78. Currently, it's at $71. In the PBO recently said you will blow through your projected budget by $7 billion, which we know because either you can't do math or you can't manage or both. Now, can you please confirm just the number?
So
How much
time is,
worse
Mr. Hallan,
will the deficit be?
Time is up, and a brief answer, please.
What will the deficit be?
Mr. Hallan's question was incoherent and it wasn't clear. He said the dollar is trading at, I think he meant oil, but he
Canadian dollar is
mashed up
trading at
his words in
$72,
his
Minister.
word salad. So it's really impossible to answer a question which is so
Because you don't want to answer,
incoherent
because you
and
know how bad the
encoding.
answer will be. Thank you.
Okay, time is up with Ms. Stubbs for 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister Freeland and Minister Wilkinson, for being here today. Of course, Conservatives always supported the nation-building Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, undeniably in federal jurisdiction. What we advocated, though, was for the federal government to assert federal jurisdiction and the rule of law in order to ensure the private sector proponent could get that pipeline built on their dime and on their schedule. Mr. Freeland, do you agree with Stats Can from last Thursday's report that if Canada didn't have contributions from oil and gas right now, that Canada would be in a recession?
The strength of the Canadian economy today, in the past, is very much built on our oil and gas sector. I absolutely recognize the value that it brings in terms of jobs, in terms of revenues, in terms of our trade balance.
So the two things that report said that are keeping Canada's economy going is public sector spending and oil and gas production. The problem is that because your government has killed two other potential export pipelines in Northern Gateway and Energy East, and only now is getting the Trans Mountain expansion built and starting to operate as a $34 billion liability on taxpayers, pipeline capacity is actually full, which will automatically cut production, Canadian energy businesses, jobs, and opportunities. So based on that, how can the Liberals and your anti-energy, anti-private sector colleagues possibly justify imposing an oil and gas cap on Canada, a job-killing oil and gas cap on Canada?
I'm going to start answering the question, and Minister Wilkinson may want to offer some thoughts. Look, I do think that in the areas where it's possible for everyone in this committee and everyone in our House to agree, we should. And I think that it is really meaningful and actually great that we have completed a nation-building project that both Rachel Notley and Danielle Smith support. That is a good thing for Canada. I also absolutely agree, as do all economists, that oil and gas is an important part of Canada's economy. Hang on. Having said that,
my question was about the emissions.
Having said that, it is absolutely inappropriate for Conservatives to criticize our government when it comes to pipelines. We got a pipeline built to Tidewater. Conservatives did not. That is the reality. This is a nation-building project. I think there was in the Calgary Herald. There was a senior Alberta energy leader talked about this as a nation-building project, and it was our government that got it
because
built.
of your lack of getting pipelines done. Does it self-impose a job-killing oil and gas cap on itself? The United States does it?
The key question here is who got a pipeline built and who didn't.
And the answer is that
our government built. It's a nation-building project that is contributing meaningfully to our national prosperity and to good wages for Canadian workers. I think that is a record I am proud to stand on.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer the question about the emissions cap. I mean, the emissions cap has not actually been announced to date, but it is both an important part of reducing carbon emissions in line with what science tells us we must.
Can I ask you to hold 1 sec? We have a point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Falk, on a point of order.
Member Stubbs specifically asked the question to Minister Freeland, and I think it would only be appropriate and proper for Minister Freeland to answer the question and not Minister Wilkinson.
I would say that the emissions cap actually falls within my area of authority.
And sorry, Minister, Mr. Falk, I'm going to ask you to hold a sec. To address your point of order, procedurally, a question was asked to Minister Freeland, but the emissions cap does fall under Minister Wilkinson's mandate and jurisdiction. So if you want a specific question on that, I think that is appropriate for Minister Wilkinson to answer. But, I will go back to Ms. Stubbs because it is her time to ask the questions. But I would allow, this is a good reminder for committee members, if you ask a question, allow the ministers to answer so they can give a fulsome answer to the question asked. So, Ms. Stubbs, I'm going to go back to you, and if you'd like to direct that question over.
Chair, and I certainly will when the question is actually answered. So, Minister Wilkinson, can you confirm whether or not Canada's biggest competitor and customer, the United States, whether the OPEC producers, Canada's biggest competitors in hostile regimes, whether Mexico, Canada's North American competitor, whether Norway, whether European countries, whether countries in South Africa or South America impose on themselves a job-killing oil and gas emissions cap? Can you confirm?
Well, it is a cap that is actually intended to drive employment in oil and gas producing areas in this country. There will be thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs created because of the initiatives around carbon capture and sequestration, the implementation of methane reductions. It will strengthen the long-term competitiveness of the industry, which the world is moving towards lower carbon, irrespective of what the UCP says, which on the weekend has decided that that climate change is not an issue anymore somehow. It is something that actually will help us to reduce emissions. No sector gets a pass, but it also is going to strengthen the competitiveness and create jobs and economic opportunity in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and Newfoundland and Labrador.
And in truth, European countries are all backing away actually from these policies because they're causing unreliable and too expensive.
But that's actually not true.
Energy, power,
that's not
fuel.
true.
It is absolutely
It is
true
not true.
if you actually watch what the rest of the country is doing.
It is not true.
And the truth is that there is no other oil and gas producing country on Earth.
You just talked about Europe. Europe is actually doubling down on the energy transion because it's both an energy security and a climate issue.
And Sweden has announced a suspension of all activities towards their goal.
Ms. Stubbs, I'll ask you to hold. We have a point of order. Go ahead.
Just for the sake of translators, we have two people, Minister and the person who's asking the question, Ms. Stubbs, talking of each other. I'm just, aside from allowing the minister to respond or the question to be finished, I'm worried about the translators.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jawari. It's a very good point on a point of order that you've raised. Colleagues speaking over each other does not make the jobs of our interpreters any easier. It makes it much more difficult. So I'll address you, sir, in 1 second. So I would ask Ms. Stubbs, with your time, to ask the question, but also allow the minister to have time to answer the question, reasonably in a reasonable amount of time. And I hope that addresses your concern and the concerns of this committee member as well. Mr. Hallan, on a point of order.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Jari, about showing respect for our interpreters, but I hope, Chair, that you would see in the last exchange, Ms. Stubbs actually had not gotten to her question, and it was the minister that interrupted her. And I would also ask the minister to please respect the interpreters and let Ms. Stubbs finish before he attempts to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Hallan, for providing that and agreeing with Mr. Jari. I just will say that Minister Wilkinson was interrupted as well through providing his answer, so it goes several ways. I would ask all colleagues to ask and allow an answer from the minister. I think we can set the ground rules that we can give them enough time to make sure they can give a fulsome answer to the very important questions they're asking. You got about 20 seconds left, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. You can get a quick question in if you like, and we can move forward. Thank you.
The reality is none of those countries are imposing a job-killing oil and gas emissions cap on themselves because they know it will hurt their people and their economies. And your collective failures after 9 years on pipelines have maxed out pipeline capacity. Those combined will cut production, oil and gas production, jobs, businesses, and money from Canada, no matter what you say. And that is actually the truth about what is occurring here. And you do owe it to Canadians, especially the small and medium-sized producers, operators, Indigenous communities, and contractors, who all together, including with chambers of commerce and other private sector proponents, are saying your emissions cap will damage Canada catastrophically.
And Minister, we are at time, but I can give you, if you have a 5-second answer there, you can provide to that 10 seconds. Go ahead.
I didn't ask a question, I made a statement.
Go ahead, if you'd like to provide a short answer.
The fact is, our government built a pipeline to Tidewater. The Conservatives failed to do so. And as a point of fact, the capacity is not yet fully utilized. That's the fact.
Thank you, Minister.
The final question, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, it cost us $34 billion. Are you going to get that money back, or are you going to strike the debt as some kind of national reconciliation, fighting Putin, saving the planet initiative? Are we getting our $34 billion back, and how are we going to get back if we're not getting 100% of the tolls?
So first of all, Mr. Angus, I object very strongly to a mocking reference to fighting Vladimir Putin. He is the biggest menace to global security.
And that's got nothing to do with bitumen coming down the pipe. This is what you brought into this.
Your question,
this is what you brought into this whole conversation. So are we getting our $34 billion back?
Because it's relevant, and I didn't say it mockingly. In terms of the actual value, I am, and let me be categorical, I am very confident that Canadians will get a good deal on this. They already are,
Will we get the
and they will.
$34 billion
I'm very confident we will, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Time's up.